My name is Rachel Martinez, and I'm 26 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 months ago, but the effects are still rippling through my family today. You see, I always thought my sister Emma was my best friend, my closest confidant, the one person I could trust with anything. I was wrong. Dead wrong. For 2 years, Emma had been systematically destroying my relationship with my boyfriend Jake from the inside, planting seeds of doubt, spreading lies, and manipulating situations to make me look unstable and dramatic. She did it so cleverly, so subtly, that I never suspected a thing. Until the night of our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner, when I played a recording that exposed everything. That recording didn't just save my relationship. It ended Emma's engagement to her fiancé Marcus, destroyed her reputation in our family, and revealed a side of my sister I never knew existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story is about more than just sibling rivalry. It's about manipulation, betrayal, and the moment when the truth finally came to light. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in Sacramento, California, Emma and I were inseparable. She was 3 years older, and I idolized her. Emma Rodriguez, she kept our father's surname even after Mom remarried when I was 12, was everything I thought I wanted to be. Beautiful, confident, charismatic, and somehow always the center of attention wherever we went. Our parents, Linda and David Martinez, had always treated us fairly, but there was no denying that Emma had a certain magnetism that drew people to her. I remember being 8 years old, watching Emma get ready for her first high school dance. She was 15, stunning in a way that seemed effortless, and I sat on her bed mesmerized as she applied makeup with the precision of a professional artist. "One day, Rachel," she had said, catching my reflection in her vanity mirror, "you'll be even prettier than me." At the time, I thought it was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to me. Emma had always been protective of me, or so I thought. When kids at school made fun of my thick glasses in elementary school, Emma would find them the next day and somehow convince them to apologize. When I struggled with math in middle school, she spent hours tutoring me, patient and encouraging even when I felt hopeless. When our parents divorced when I was 9 and Emma was 12, she was the one who held me while I cried, promising me that everything would be okay. "We'll always have each other, Rach," she used to say, using the nickname only she was allowed to call me. "Sisters forever, no matter what." I believed her completely. Even as we grew older and our paths diverged, I never questioned Emma's loyalty. She went to UC Berkeley and studied communications, while I stayed closer to home and attended UC Davis for graphic design. She moved to San Francisco after graduation and landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm, while I chose to stay in Sacramento and work for a small but successful design studio. Our choices reflected our personalities. Emma always reaching for the spotlight, me content to create beautiful things behind the scenes. Despite the distance, we talked almost every day. Emma would call me during her commute, sharing stories about her glamorous city life, her demanding but exciting job, and eventually, her relationship with Marcus Chen, a successful real estate developer she met through work. Marcus was everything our parents had hoped Emma would find: stable, wealthy, ambitious, and completely devoted to her. I was genuinely happy for Emma when she and Marcus got engaged 8 months ago. The proposal was everything she had dreamed of since we were little girls playing dress-up: a sunset dinner on a private yacht in San Francisco Bay, a stunning 3-carat diamond ring, and Marcus on one knee declaring his love in front of a photographer he had secretly hired to capture the moment. Emma had called me immediately afterward, breathless with excitement. "Rachel, oh my God, you have to see this ring!" And Marcus was so romantic he had this whole speech prepared about how I'm his soulmate and his best friend, and how he can't imagine life without me. I could hear the joy in her voice, and I felt nothing but happiness for her. "I want you to be my maid of honor," she had continued. "I can't imagine anyone else standing beside me on the most important day of my life." Of course I said yes. Emma was my sister, my role model, my best friend. The idea of not being her maid of honor was unthinkable. It was around this time, about 9 months ago, that I met Jake Thompson. I was working late at the design studio, struggling with a particularly challenging logo project for a new restaurant chain, when Jake walked in. He was the owner of the restaurant group, coming to check on our progress, and I was immediately struck by how different he was from the typical businessmen I usually dealt with. Jake was tall and lean, with kind brown eyes and an easy smile that made me feel comfortable instantly. He wasn't flashy or pretentious like some of our clients. Instead, he wore a simple button-down shirt and jeans, and when he looked at my design concepts, he asked thoughtful questions and really listened to my explanations. Most importantly, he treated me like an expert in my field, not just some junior designer whose opinions didn't matter. "This concept here," he said, pointing to one of my sketches. "It captures exactly what I was hoping for but couldn't articulate. How did you know?" I found myself explaining my design philosophy, how I tried to understand not just what a business did, but what it represented, what emotions it wanted to evoke in customers. Jake listened intently, asking follow-up questions that showed he genuinely understood and appreciated the creative process. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime?" he asked as he was leaving. "I'd love to hear more about your work, and honestly, I'd just like to get to know you better." It wasn't a line or a casual invitation. There was something sincere in the way he asked, something that made me believe he was genuinely interested in me as a person. I said yes, and that coffee date turned into a 3-hour conversation that flowed so naturally I completely lost track of time. Jake was 31, 5 years older than me, and had built his restaurant business from the ground up, starting with a single food truck after college. He was passionate about creating community gathering spaces, places where families could make memories over good food. He talked about his work with the same enthusiasm I felt for design, and I found his dedication incredibly attractive. More than that, Jake was kind in a way that seemed effortless. He remembered small details about things I told him, asked about my family, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions on everything from art to politics to our shared love of hiking. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally. We spent weekends exploring Sacramento's hiking trails, trying new restaurants, and having long conversations about our dreams and goals. Jake made me laugh in a way I hadn't experienced before, and he had a way of making me feel beautiful and intelligent and valued. I was excited to introduce him to Emma when she came home for a visit 3 weeks after Jake and I started dating. I had told her about him during our phone calls, and she seemed enthusiastic about meeting the man who had clearly captured my interest. "He sounds perfect for you, Rach," she had said during one of our conversations. "I can't wait to meet this Jake and give him the big sister interrogation." The first meeting took place at a casual dinner at our parents' house. Mom had made her famous lasagna, and the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Jake brought flowers for Mom and a bottle of wine for Dad, small gestures that showed his thoughtfulness and respect for my family. Emma was at her most charming that night, asking Jake thoughtful questions about his business, sharing funny stories about our childhood, and generally being the engaging, delightful person I had always admired. Jake seemed genuinely taken with her, laughing at her jokes and complimenting her engagement ring when she showed it off. "Emma's amazing," Jake told me later as we walked to his car. "I can see where you get your warmth and intelligence. You're lucky to have such a close relationship with your sister." I agreed completely. Watching Emma and Jake interact, seeing how easily they got along, made me feel like everything in my life was falling into place. I had found a man I was falling in love with, and he fit seamlessly into my family. What more could I ask for? But looking back now, I realized that first dinner was when everything started to change, though so subtly that I didn't notice it at the time. Emma began calling me more frequently, always wanting to know what Jake and I had done over the weekend, where we had gone, what we had talked about. She framed it as sisterly interest, wanting to stay connected to my life despite the distance between us. "Tell me everything," she would say. "I want to hear all about your dates. Jake seems so sweet, and I love seeing you this happy." I shared everything with her, just as I always had. I told her about our hiking adventures, our discussions about the future, even our minor disagreements, and how we worked through them. Emma listened to it all, with what seemed like genuine interest and affection. "He's really good for you," she would often say. "I've never seen you this confident and happy in a relationship." It felt wonderful to have my sister's approval and support. Emma had always been an excellent judge of character, and her endorsement of Jake made me feel even more secure in our relationship. The first crack in my confidence came about 2 months into dating Jake. We had planned a romantic weekend getaway to Mendocino, something we had been looking forward to for weeks. Jake had made reservations at a charming bed and breakfast, and I had taken Friday off work so we could have a full 3 days together. Thursday night, Emma called me, her voice shaky and upset. "Rachel, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I really need to talk to someone. Marcus and I had this huge fight, and I don't know what to do. Of course, I wanted to help my sister." Emma rarely called when she was upset, and I could hear genuine distress in her voice. "What happened?" I asked, settling in for what I assumed would be a long conversation. "He's been so distant lately," Emma explained. "And tonight he basically told me he's not sure we're moving too fast with the wedding planning. I'm scared he's having second thoughts about everything." My heart broke for her. Emma had been so excited about the wedding, and the thought of Marcus pulling away must have been devastating. "I'm sure it's just pre-wedding jitters," I tried to reassure her. "You know how men can get overwhelmed by wedding planning?" "Maybe," Emma said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Rachel, I know this is a lot to ask, but could you drive up to the city tomorrow? I really need my sister right now. I don't want to bother Mom and Dad with this, and you're the only person who really understands me." I looked at my packed suitcase for Mendocino, then thought about my sister's tear-filled voice. There was no question what I had to do. "Of course," I said. "Let me call Jake and explain. I'll drive up first thing in the morning." Jake was disappointed when I called to cancel our weekend, but he was understanding. "Family comes first," he said, though I could hear the sadness in his voice. "I hope Emma's okay. Maybe we can reschedule for next weekend." I spent the entire weekend in San Francisco with Emma, listening to her analyze every detail of her relationship with Marcus, offering comfort and advice, and helping her work through her fears. By Sunday afternoon, she seemed much better, and Marcus had called to apologize and suggest they have dinner to talk things through. "Thank you so much for being here," Emma said as I prepared to drive home. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You're the best sister anyone could ask for." I felt good about being there for Emma, but I also felt guilty about canceling on Jake. When I called him Sunday night to apologize again, he was gracious about it, but something felt slightly different in his tone. Not angry exactly, but maybe a little hurt that I had chosen my sister over him so quickly. "I understand family emergencies," he said, "but I guess I'm just wondering if this is going to be a pattern. I want to be supportive of your relationship with Emma, but I also want to feel like I'm a priority in your life too." His concern was reasonable, and I assured him that the situation with Emma had been unusual. "She was really in crisis," I explained. "She never asks for help like that. I promise it won't happen again." Jake accepted my explanation, and things seemed to go back to normal between us. But looking back, I realized that was the first time Emma's needs had directly interfered with my relationship with Jake. It wouldn't be the last. Over the following months, there always seemed to be some crisis or important event that required my immediate attention. Emma needed help with wedding planning, and was too overwhelmed to handle vendor meetings alone. Emma had another fight with Marcus and needed someone to talk her through it. Emma was having problems at work and needed emotional support. Emma was feeling disconnected from the family and needed quality sister time to feel grounded. Each request seemed reasonable and urgent. Each time, I rearranged my plans with Jake to be available for my sister. Each time, Jake was understanding but slightly more distant afterward. I began to notice that he stopped making long-term plans with me, stopped talking about future trips or events more than a week or two in advance. "I never know when Emma might need you," he said one evening when I suggested we plan a vacation for the following month. "I don't want to book something and then have you cancel again." I bristled at his comment. "That's not fair," I said. "Emma's going through a lot right now with the wedding stress and work pressure. Once things settle down, it won't be like this." "When?" Jake asked quietly. "When will things settle down? Because it seems like there's always something with Emma that takes priority over us." I wanted to argue with him, but deep down, I knew he had a point. I had canceled or postponed plans with Jake at least 6 times in 4 months to deal with Emma's various crises. But she was my sister, and she needed me. Wasn't that what family was supposed to do for each other? She's always been there for me, I explained to Jake. When we were kids, when our parents divorced, when I was struggling in school, Emma was my rock. Now she needs me to be hers. Jake nodded, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. I'm not asking you to abandon your sister, he said. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe sometimes she can handle things on her own, and sometimes I need you too. The conversation left me feeling torn and confused. I loved Jake, but I also couldn't abandon my sister when she needed me. I decided to talk to Emma about it, to explain that Jake was feeling neglected and see if we could find a better balance. Emma's response surprised me. Instead of being understanding, she seemed hurt and defensive. I can't believe Jake is trying to come between us, she said when I called her the next day. I mean, I get that he wants time with you, but family should come first, right? What kind of man tries to separate a woman from her sister? Her words planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Was Jake being unreasonable? Was he trying to isolate me from my family? Emma had so much more experience with relationships than I did. Maybe she could see something I was missing. I don't think he's trying to separate us, I said, but even as I spoke the words, I felt uncertain. He just wants to feel like a priority sometimes. Of course he does, Emma said, her tone softening. And that's normal. But Rachel, you have to be careful not to lose yourself in a relationship. I've seen it happen to other women. They get so focused on pleasing their boyfriend that they abandon the relationships that really matter. The conversation left me even more confused. Emma's concerns seemed valid, but so did Jake's. I found myself caught in the middle, trying to balance everyone's needs and making no one happy. Things came to a head about 6 months into my relationship with Jake. Emma called on a Friday afternoon, crying hysterically about another fight with Marcus. This time, she said, he had accused her of being too dependent on me and suggested that maybe they should postpone the wedding until she could learn to handle problems without always running to her little sister. He doesn't understand our relationship, Emma sobbed. He thinks it's weird that we're so close. Rachel, I think Marcus might be trying to change me, and I don't know what to do. That evening, Jake and I had planned to attend his company's annual dinner, an important event where he was being recognized for his business achievements. I had bought a new dress, and Jake had been looking forward to introducing me to his colleagues and friends. But listening to Emma cry, knowing she was alone in San Francisco dealing with relationship problems that might end her engagement, I felt like I had no choice. I have to go to Emma, I told Jake as I explained the situation. She's falling apart, and Marcus is being completely unreasonable. I can't let her go through this alone. Jake's face went through a series of expressions: disappointment, frustration, and finally, resignation. This dinner is important to me, Rachel, he said quietly. I've been looking forward to having you there. I know, and I'm sorry, I said, already gathering my things. But Emma really needs me right now. Surely you understand that family emergencies have to come first. Is it really an emergency? Jake asked. Or is it just Emma being dramatic about relationship problems that she and Marcus need to work out themselves? His words stung, and I felt anger flare up in my chest. Emma is not dramatic, I snapped. She's in real pain, and she needs her sister. If you can't understand that, then maybe you don't understand me at all. Jake looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something change in his expression. You're right, he said finally. Maybe I don't understand. Go to Emma. I'll go to the dinner alone. The way he said it, so calm and resigned, scared me more than if he had yelled. But I was already committed to driving to San Francisco, and Emma was counting on me. I spent that weekend listening to Emma analyze every word of her fight with Marcus, offering comfort and advice, and helping her practice what she would say when they talked things through. By Sunday, she seemed much better, and Marcus had agreed to couples counseling to work on their communication issues. When I returned to Sacramento Sunday night, Jake's attitude toward me had shifted in a way I couldn't quite define. He was polite and kind, but there was a distance that hadn't been there before. He stopped talking about long-term plans entirely, stopped mentioning future trips or events, and seemed to be holding back emotionally in a way that made me feel insecure. Are we okay? I asked him during dinner the following week. We're fine, Jake said, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm just trying to understand where I fit in your life. The uncertainty in our relationship began affecting everything. I found myself questioning Jake's motives, wondering if Emma was right about him trying to control me. When Jake didn't text me back immediately, I wondered if he was pulling away. When he seemed tired after work, I worried that he was losing interest in me. Emma, meanwhile, seemed to have an endless stream of advice about my relationship concerns. Men need to know you're not going to drop everything for them, she would say during our phone calls. If Jake really loves you, he'll accept that you have other important relationships in your life. Or, it's a red flag when a man tries to make you feel guilty for helping your family. That's controlling behavior, Rachel. Or, maybe Jake isn't as mature as you thought if he can't handle dating a woman who has close family relationships. Each conversation left me feeling more confused and less confident in my relationship. Emma's perspective seemed wise and experienced, but it also made me question everything about Jake's behavior and motives. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago, just days before our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner. Jake and I had been together for almost 8 months, but our relationship felt fragile and uncertain in a way that broke my heart. I loved him, but I constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells, trying to balance his needs with Emma's while never quite succeeding at either. It was then that I made a discovery that changed everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was working late at the design studio on a particularly complex branding project for a tech startup. The office was empty except for me, and I had my phone on silent mode to avoid distractions. When I finally checked it around 9 p.m., I saw 7 missed calls from Emma and a series of increasingly frantic text messages. Rachel, call me immediately. This is urgent. Marcus and I had a huge fight. Where are you? I need you right now. I'm having a panic attack. Please call. My heart raced as I immediately called her back, prepared for another crisis that would require me to drop everything and drive to San Francisco. But when Emma answered, her voice wasn't the tear-filled panic tone I expected. Instead, she sounded perfectly normal, almost cheerful. "Oh, hey, Rachel," she said brightly. "I was wondering when you'd call back." "Emma, what happened? Your messages sounded like an emergency. Are you okay? What's wrong with Marcus?" There was a brief pause, and then Emma laughed. "Oh, that. Yeah, we worked it out. You know how it is. Couples fight, couples make up. Everything's fine now." I stared at my phone in confusion. "But you said you were having a panic attack. You said it was urgent." "Did I?" Emma's voice carried a note of casual dismissal that I'd never heard before. I guess I was just being dramatic. You know how emotional I get sometimes. "Anyway, what are you up to? How are things with Jake?" The abrupt shift in her tone and topic left me feeling unsettled. For months, Emma's crises had been driving wedges between Jake and me, causing me to cancel plans and prioritize her needs over everything else. But this felt different. This felt calculated. "Emma," I said slowly, "I was about to leave work and drive up to San Francisco. I thought you needed me." "Oh, you don't need to do that," she said quickly. "Like I said, everything's fine now. Marcus brought home flowers and we talked it out. Crisis averted." After we hung up, I sat in my empty office feeling a strange mixture of relief and unease. Relief that Emma was okay, but unease about the whole interaction. Something about her tone, the way she had dismissed her own emergency, the casual way she had asked about Jake, it all felt wrong somehow. That night, I mentioned the incident to Jake when he called to check in on me. "That's weird," he said, and I could hear the concern in his voice. She made it sound like her world was ending, then acted like it was no big deal. "Maybe she was just really upset in the moment and calmed down quickly," I suggested, but even as I said it, I didn't quite believe it myself. "Rachel," Jake said gently, "how many times has this happened? Emma calls with some crisis, you drop everything to help her, and then it turns out to be not as serious as she made it sound?" I wanted to defend my sister, but Jake's question forced me to really think about the pattern. There had been the weekend in Mendocino that I had canceled for Emma's crisis with Marcus, which had resolved itself within hours. There had been the work emergency that had required my immediate support, which had turned out to be a minor disagreement with her boss. There had been the wedding planning meltdown that had needed my urgent attention, which had been resolved with a single phone call to the florist. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe a few times. And each time it's pulled you away from something we had planned together? The question hung in the air between us, and I found myself unable to answer it directly. Because the truth was, yes, Emma's crises did seem to have an uncanny timing when it came to interfering with my plans with Jake. 3 days later, I got another frantic call from Emma. This time, she claimed that Marcus had suggested postponing their wedding indefinitely, and she was, quote, completely devastated, and needed me to come to San Francisco immediately to help her figure out what to do. But this time, instead of immediately dropping everything, I did something I had never done before. I called Marcus directly. "Hey Marcus," I said when he answered, trying to keep my voice casual. "I just wanted to check in and see how you guys are doing." Emma seemed pretty upset about the wedding timeline discussion. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What wedding timeline discussion?" Marcus asked, sounding genuinely confused. My stomach dropped. "The one where you suggested postponing the wedding indefinitely?" "Rachel, I never said anything like that. Emma and I haven't talked about changing any wedding plans. In fact, we just confirmed the final headcount with the caterer this morning." "Where did you get that idea?" The phone felt heavy in my hand as the implications of Marcus's words sank in. "Emma called me. She said you guys had a fight about it." "We didn't fight about anything today," Marcus said, his voice growing concerned. "We had coffee together this morning before work, talked about Thanksgiving plans, and that was it." "Rachel, is Emma okay? This doesn't sound like her." After I hung up with Marcus, I sat in my car outside the design studio, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I had just learned. Emma had lied to me. Not just exaggerated or been dramatic, she had completely fabricated a crisis that didn't exist. But why would she do that? What possible reason could my sister have for lying to me about her relationship problems? The answer came to me slowly, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. Every one of Emma's crises had coincided with important plans I had with Jake. The Mendocino weekend. The company dinner. The hiking trip we had planned for my birthday. The concert tickets Jake had surprised me with. Each time, Emma's urgent need for support had forced me to choose between her and Jake. And each time, I had chosen Emma. I thought back to all the conversations we'd had about Jake, all the advice Emma had given me about my relationship. How she had suggested that Jake was being controlling when he expressed frustration about my cancellations. How she had warned me about men who tried to isolate women from their families. How she had questioned Jake's maturity and commitment. Had Emma been deliberately sabotaging my relationship? The thought was so shocking, so contrary to everything I believed about my sister, that I almost dismissed it immediately. But the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. Emma had lied to me about a crisis with Marcus. She had repeatedly created emergencies that pulled me away from Jake. She had consistently undermined my confidence in my relationship, while positioning herself as the voice of wisdom and experience. I needed proof. I needed to know for certain whether my suspicions were justified, or whether I was being paranoid and unfair to my sister. That night, I made a decision that felt like a betrayal even as I recognized its necessity. The next time Emma called with a crisis, I would record the conversation. Not to use against her, but to have a clear record of what she actually said, to verify whether her version of events matched reality. Hefsu. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was having lunch with Jake at our favorite cafe. We had been having such a good time, laughing and talking without the tension that had been plaguing our relationship for months. For the first time in weeks, things felt normal between us. Thus, when I saw Emma's name on my phone, I felt my stomach clench with anxiety. Jake noticed my expression immediately. "Us. Emma?" he asked, and I nodded. "You don't have to answer it," he said gently. "Whatever it is, it can probably wait an hour." But I had already decided what I needed to do. "I'm going to answer," I said, "but I want to try something different this time." I activated the voice recording app on my phone before answering the call. "Rachel, thank God," Emma's voice came through the speaker, sounding breathless and upset. "I need you to come to San Francisco right now. Something terrible has happened." What's wrong? I asked, watching Jake's expression shift from resigned understanding to alert concern. It's Marcus, Emma said, her voice breaking in what sounded like genuine distress. He came home from work today and told me he's been having doubts about us. He said he thinks we're too different, that maybe we rushed into the engagement. Rachel, I think he's going to break up with me. I looked at Jake, who was listening to every word since Emma's voice was carrying clearly in the quiet cafe. His expression was skeptical, but I could see him trying to remain supportive. Did he actually say he wants to break up? I asked. Not in those exact words, Emma admitted, but it was clear what he meant. He said he needs space to think about our future. What else could that mean? Rachel, I'm falling apart here. I can't handle this alone. Can you please come up here tonight? I know it's a lot to ask, but I really need my sister right now. I looked at Jake, who was watching me carefully. We had plans to attend a play that evening, something we had been looking forward to for weeks. More importantly, we had been having such a good day together, the kind of easy, happy time we used to have before all the complications with Emma began. Let me call you back in a few minutes, I said. I need to check on something first. After I hung up, Jake reached across the table and took my hand. Rachel, I know this is hard, but I have to ask, are you going to call Marcus to verify Emma's story? The fact that he had to ask, that it had become necessary to fact-check my own sister's claims, broke my heart. But I knew he was right. This time, I called Marcus while Jake listened, putting the phone on speaker so we could both hear his response. Marcus, it's Rachel again. I'm sorry to bother you, but Emma called and said you two had a serious conversation about your relationship today. She's pretty upset about it. Rachel, what are you talking about? Marcus sounded genuinely confused and a little concerned. I haven't seen Emma since this morning when we had coffee. I've been in client meetings all day, and I'm not even getting home until after 8 tonight. What did she tell you? My heart sank as I explained Emma's version of events. Marcus listened in growing alarm. None of that happened, he said firmly. I never said anything about having doubts or needing space. Rachel, I'm worried about Emma. This is the second time this week you've called about problems between us that don't exist. Is she okay? Should I come home early? After assuring Marcus that I would figure out what was going on, I hung up and looked at Jake. The expression on his face was a mixture of vindication and sadness. She lied again, I said, stating the obvious. Jake nodded slowly. The question is, why? What does Emma gain by creating these fake crises? But I was beginning to understand exactly what Emma gained. Every fake emergency pulled me away from Jake. Every fabricated crisis reinforced her position as the most important person in my life. Every lie I believed drove a wedge between Jake and me, making our relationship more fragile and uncertain. She's sabotaging us, I said, the words feeling strange and terrible in my mouth. She's been sabotaging our relationship from the beginning. Jake squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? I looked down at my phone, where the recording of Emma's latest fabrication was saved. I'm going to call her back and confront her. But when I called Emma back and tried to gently question her story, she doubled down on her claims. She insisted that Marcus had indeed expressed doubts, that I must have misunderstood something when I talked to him, that maybe Marcus was lying to me to avoid getting involved in their relationship drama. Rachel, I can't believe you're questioning me about this, Emma said, her voice taking on a hurt tone I had never heard before. I'm your sister. I would never lie to you about something this serious. Why would you believe Marcus over me? The manipulation in her voice was so clear now that I wondered how I had missed it for so long. Emma was not only lying to me, but she was trying to make me feel guilty for catching her in the lie. I'm not saying you're lying, I said carefully, still recording the conversation. I'm just trying to understand what happened. What happened is that my fiancé is having second thoughts about marrying me, and instead of supporting me, my own sister is acting like I'm making it up. Emma shot back. You know what? Forget it. If you don't want to help me, I'll figure this out on my own. And with that, she hung up. I sat in the cafe with Jake, staring at my phone and feeling like my entire understanding of my family had just shifted. Emma wasn't the loving, supportive sister I had always believed her to be. She was someone who would lie to me, manipulate me, and deliberately sabotage my relationship for reasons I still didn't fully understand. "I'm so sorry," I said to Jake, feeling tears begin to fill my eyes. "I'm so sorry I didn't see this sooner. I'm sorry I chose her over you so many times." Jake moved his chair closer to mine and put his arm around me. "You don't need to apologize for loving your sister," he said gently. "But now that you know what's been happening, what are you going to do about it?" That was the question that would determine everything. I had proof of Emma's lies, recorded evidence of her manipulation. The question was whether I would use it, and if so, how. As I sat there with Jake's arm around me, processing the betrayal of someone I had trusted completely, I began to formulate a plan. Our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner was just 10 days away. Emma would be there with Marcus, playing the role of the happy, loving fiancé. My parents would be there, continuing to see Emma as the golden child who could do no wrong. And I would be there too, with the recordings that proved exactly who my sister really was. The time for protecting Emma's lies was over. The time for truth had finally come. Once I knew what to look for, Emma's manipulation became impossible to ignore. But knowing about her recent lies only made me question everything that had come before. How long had this been going on? How many of her previous crises had been fabricated? And most importantly, what was her endgame? Over the next week, I found myself analyzing every conversation we'd had about Jake, every piece of advice she'd given me, every crisis that had pulled me away from my relationship. The more I examined our interactions, the more calculated they seemed. I decided I needed to dig deeper, to understand the full scope of what Emma had been doing, and I knew exactly where to start. 3 months earlier, Emma had called me in tears about a supposed fight with Marcus over their honeymoon plans. According to Emma, Marcus had unilaterally canceled their reservations at a resort in Tuscany and booked something cheaper in Napa Valley instead, claiming they needed to be more financially responsible. She had been devastated by his lack of consideration for her dream honeymoon, and I had spent an entire weekend helping her process her feelings and plan how to approach Marcus about it. That weekend, Jake and I had been supposed to go camping with his college friends, an important trip for me to meet people who were significant in his life. Instead, I had canceled to console Emma, and Jake had gone alone, making awkward excuses for my absence. Now armed with the knowledge that Emma was capable of fabricating entire scenarios, I decided to investigate this incident more thoroughly. I started by calling the resort in Tuscany that Emma claimed Marcus had canceled. After some persistence, and explaining that I was helping plan a surprise for my sister, I was able to confirm that no reservation had ever been made under either Emma Rodriguez or Marcus Chen's names. Not only had Marcus not canceled their Tuscany reservation, there had never been a reservation to cancel. Next, I called the Napa Valley Resort, where Emma claimed Marcus had booked their cheaper alternative honeymoon. Same result. No reservation, no record of any inquiry, nothing. My hands were shaking as I hung up from that second call. Emma hadn't just exaggerated a disagreement with Marcus. She had invented an entire fictional conflict, complete with specific details about resorts and dates and financial concerns. She had created an elaborate lie that required me to cancel important plans with Jake. Also, I would spend a weekend validating her feelings about a problem that didn't exist. But it got worse. Much worse. Yes. As I sat in my apartment that evening trying to process the magnitude of Emma's deception, I remembered something that had always puzzled me. Emma had an uncanny ability to know exactly when Jake and I had special plans. She never seemed to have her crises on random Tuesday nights or boring weekends when Jake and I were just hanging around. Her emergencies always coincided with our important dates, our planned trips, our special occasions. How did she always know? The answer came to me gradually, and when it did, I felt sick to my stomach. Emma had access to my social media accounts. Not just as a follower, she had my actual passwords. I had given them to her years ago during a period when I was having trouble with my phone and needed her to post some work-related updates for me. I had never changed the passwords afterward because I trusted her completely. With growing horror, I logged into my Instagram account and checked my direct message history with Jake. Sure enough, our private conversations about upcoming plans were all there. The camping trip with his friends that I had canceled for the fake honeymoon crisis. The concert tickets he had surprised me with, which I had mentioned in a DM before Emma, suddenly needed urgent help with wedding planning. The romantic weekend getaway to Carmel that Jake had planned for my birthday, which I had posted about in my stories before Emma had her fake panic attack about Marcus suggesting they postpone the wedding. Emma had been monitoring my private conversations with Jake, using the information to time her manufactured crises for maximum disruption to our relationship. The violation felt enormous. Not only had Emma been lying to me and manipulating me, but she had been invading my privacy, reading my most intimate conversations, and using that information to sabotage my happiness. I immediately changed all my passwords and called Jake to tell him what I had discovered. "She's been reading our messages?" Jake's voice was a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Rachel, that's not just manipulation. That's stalking. That's a serious violation of both of our privacy." "I know," I said, feeling ashamed even though I wasn't the one who had done anything wrong. I gave her the passwords years ago and never thought to change them. I never imagined she would use them like this. "This explains so much," Jake said quietly. "The timing of her crises was always so convenient for her and so devastating for us. She knew exactly when to strike to cause maximum damage." As we talked, Jake helped me piece together the pattern of Emma's behavior. It wasn't just about creating fake emergencies. She had been systematically undermining my confidence in our relationship, while positioning herself as my most trusted advisor. "Think about all the advice she gave you about us," Jake said. "She convinced you I was being controlling when I got frustrated about the cancellations. She made you question my commitment when I stopped making long-term plans. She twisted every normal relationship growing pain into evidence that I wasn't right for you." He was absolutely right. Emma had been playing both sides, creating problems in our relationship through her fake crises, then offering herself as the wise sister who could help me navigate the difficulties with Jake. She had manufactured the disease and then positioned herself as the cure. But why? What could Emma possibly gain from destroying my relationship? The answer to that question came from an unexpected source: my cousin Sarah, Emma's maid of honor. I had always liked Sarah, though I didn't know her well. She was Emma's age and had been her college roommate, so most of their friendship existed in a world I wasn't part of. But when I ran into Sarah at the grocery store 2 days after my discovery about the password invasion, something in her expression made me think she might have insights into Emma's behavior. "Hey, Rachel," Sarah said, looking uncomfortable. "How are things going? Emma mentioned you and Jake have been having some problems." The fact that Emma had been discussing my relationship problems with Sarah, problems that Emma herself had created, irritated me. But I tried to keep my voice neutral. "Actually, things are much better now. We worked through some issues." Sarah looked surprised. "Really? Because Emma made it sound like you guys were pretty much over. She said Jake was pressuring you to cut ties with your family." I stared at Sarah, processing what she had just told me. Not only had Emma been manipulating me, but she had been spreading lies about Jake to other people in our extended family. She was building a narrative that painted Jake as the villain and herself as my protective sister. "Jake never said anything like that," I said carefully. "Where did Emma get that idea?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing she had stepped into something complicated. "I don't know. She talks about your relationship a lot. She's worried about you." "What kind of things does she say?" Sarah looked around the grocery store as if hoping for an escape route. "Maybe I shouldn't have brought this up. I don't want to cause problems between you and Emma." "Sarah, please, this is important. What has Emma been telling you about Jake?" After a long moment, Sarah sighed. "She says Jake is trying to isolate you from your family, that he gets jealous when you spend time with her, that he's not supportive of your close relationship with Emma. She's been really worried that you're losing yourself in the relationship." Each word felt like a punch to my stomach. Emma hadn't just been manipulating me. She had been waging a campaign against Jake with our extended family, painting him as controlling and manipulative while casting herself as my concerned protector. "Has she said these things to other people too?" I asked. Sarah nodded reluctantly. "She's mentioned it to your parents a few times. And to Marcus. She asked Marcus if he thought it was normal for a boyfriend to be so possessive." The scope of Emma's deception was staggering. She had been systematically poisoning my family's opinion of Jake while simultaneously manipulating me into questioning his behavior. She had created a narrative where Jake was the problem and she was the solution, all while being the actual source of every issue in our relationship. That night, I called my mother to test what Sarah had told me. "Mom, I was wondering if you had any concerns about Jake," I said, trying to sound casual. "Emma mentioned that you might have some reservations about him." There was a pause before my mother responded. "Well, honey, Emma has mentioned that he seems a little possessive. She's worried that he doesn't understand how close you two are as sisters." "What did Emma tell you exactly?" "Just that Jake gets upset when you help her with problems, that he doesn't seem to support your family relationships." "Emma loves you so much, Rachel. She's just concerned that Jake might not be the right fit for someone with such strong family bonds." I felt a surge of anger so intense it surprised me. Emma had been manipulating not just me but my entire family, turning them against Jake based on complete lies. She had poisoned the well so thoroughly that even if I tried to explain the truth, they might not believe me. But I was beginning to understand Emma's strategy more clearly. By convincing my family that Jake was problematic, she was creating a support system for her manipulation. When she created crises that pulled me away from Jake, my parents would see it as justified, protecting me from a controlling boyfriend. When Jake expressed frustration about the situation, they would interpret it as evidence of his possessive nature. Emma had constructed an elaborate narrative that made her the hero and Jake the villain, all while being the actual architect of every problem. As I processed this revelation, I realized that confronting Emma privately would be pointless. She was too skilled at manipulation, too practiced at making me doubt my own perceptions. She would find a way to explain away the evidence, to make me feel guilty for questioning her, to turn my discovery into another crisis that required her to play the victim. No, if I was going to expose Emma's lies, I needed to do it in a way that she couldn't manipulate or escape. I needed witnesses who could see her reaction, hear her attempts to explain away the evidence, and judge for themselves whether her stories held up to scrutiny. Our family's annual Thanksgiving dinner was 6 days away. Emma would be there with Marcus, continuing to play the role of the loving fiancé. My parents would be there, still believing Emma's lies about Jake being controlling and possessive. Other family members would be there too. Sarah, my Uncle Tom, my grandmother. And I would be there with the recordings that proved exactly what Emma had been doing. But I needed more than just the recordings. I needed a plan that would expose not just Emma's recent lies, but the full scope of her manipulation. I needed to show my family how she had been playing all of us, turning us against Jake while positioning herself as the concerned sister who only wanted what was best for me. I spent the next several days gathering evidence and planning my approach. I documented the timeline of Emma's fake crises and their correlation with my plans with Jake. I prepared questions that would reveal the holes in her stories. I practiced staying calm and focused, knowing that Emma would try to turn any confrontation into an emotional scene where she could play the victim. Most importantly, I prepared myself for the possibility that some family members might not believe me, even when presented with evidence. Emma had been building her narrative for months, and some people might be too invested in their perception of her to accept the truth. But I couldn't let that stop me. Jake deserved to have his name cleared. I deserved to be free from Emma's manipulation. And my family deserved to know who Emma really was, even if the truth was painful. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. The dinner would either free me from Emma's web of lies or destroy our family relationships entirely. Either way, the truth was finally going to come out. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I was still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle: Emma's motive. I understood how she had been manipulating me, and I had evidence of her lies. But I still couldn't comprehend why my own sister would want to destroy my relationship with Jake. What could she possibly gain from sabotaging my happiness? The answer came from the most unexpected source imaginable: Emma herself. I was at my parents' house, helping my mother prepare for Thanksgiving dinner, when Emma called. She was driving up from San Francisco and wanted to stop by early to catch up with her favorite sister before the chaos of the family gathering began. When Emma arrived, she seemed different somehow. There was an energy about her that I had never noticed before. a kind of excited anticipation that didn't match her usual composed demeanor. She hugged me tightly and immediately began chattering about how much she had missed me, how important our relationship was to her, how grateful she was to have such a supportive sister. "I have some exciting news," she said as we sat in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I had once idolized her while she got ready for high school dances. "But I want to talk to you privately first, before I tell the rest of the family." My stomach clenched with anticipation. Given everything I had discovered about Emma's capacity for deception, I was wary of any exciting news she might have to share. "Marcus and I have decided to move up our wedding date," Emma announced, her eyes sparkling with what seemed like genuine excitement. "We're going to get married in January instead of next summer." I tried to look pleased while processing this information. "That's wonderful, Emma. What made you decide to move it up?" Emma's smile became almost secretive. "Well, there are several reasons. Marcus got a promotion that comes with a big bonus, so we can afford the wedding we want without waiting. And honestly," she paused dramatically, "I'm just so ready to start our life together I don't want to wait anymore." As Emma continued talking about her accelerated wedding plans, something in her tone began to bother me. There was an undercurrent of satisfaction that seemed disproportionate to the news she was sharing. She wasn't just excited about marrying Marcus. She seemed pleased about something else entirely. "There's another reason, too," Emma said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "I didn't want to say anything before because I didn't want to hurt your feelings, but I've been worried about you lately, Rachel. The situation with Jake has been so stressful for you, and I think it's been affecting your emotional stability." I stared at her, amazed by her audacity. Emma was sitting in my bedroom, expressing concern about emotional stress that she herself had created through months of systematic manipulation. "I'm actually feeling much better about things with Jake," I said carefully, watching her reaction. Emma's expression shifted slightly, and for just a moment, I saw something that looked like disappointment cross her face. "Really? Because last week you seemed so upset about his possessiveness and his attempts to control your family relationships." I had never said anything to Emma about Jake being possessive or controlling. Those were her words, her narrative, her interpretation of his completely reasonable desire to spend time with his girlfriend without constant interruption from manufactured crises. "I don't think Jake is possessive," I said evenly. "I think he's been very patient with a difficult situation." Emma's smile became strained. "Rachel, I'm worried that you're not seeing the situation clearly. Sometimes when we're in the middle of a problematic relationship, we can't recognize the red flags. That's why it's so important to have people who love us helping us see the truth." The irony of Emma talking about people helping me see the truth was almost overwhelming, but I maintained my composure, curious to see how far she would push her false narrative. "What red flags do you think I'm missing?" I asked. Emma settled back on my childhood bed, clearly prepared to give me a detailed analysis of Jake's supposed shortcomings. "Well, for starters, the way he reacts when you help me with problems. A secure, mature man would understand that family comes first. The fact that he gets upset when you prioritize me over him shows a real lack of emotional intelligence." As Emma continued her character assassination of Jake, I found myself studying her face with new eyes. She wasn't just repeating concerns. She was actively enjoying herself. There was a satisfaction in her voice as she detailed Jake's supposed flaws, a pleasure in painting him as inadequate and wrong for me. "And then there's the way he tries to make you feel guilty for maintaining our close relationship," Emma continued. "That's classic controlling behavior, Rachel. He's trying to isolate you from the people who really know and love you. Why do you think he would want to do that?" I asked, genuinely curious about how Emma would explain Jake's supposed motivation for the behavior she had invented. Emma's eyes lit up, as if she had been waiting for exactly this question. "Because he knows he can't compete with what we have," she said with startling intensity. "Our bond as sisters is so strong, so special, that it threatens men like Jake. He knows that as long as you have me in your life, you'll never be completely dependent on him." The words hung in the air between us, and suddenly I understood everything. This wasn't just about sabotaging my relationship with Jake. It was about ensuring that Emma remained the most important person in my life. She had been systematically undermining my relationship because she couldn't bear the thought of sharing my loyalty and attention with anyone else. Emma's manipulation hadn't been about protecting me from Jake. It had been about protecting her position as the center of my emotional world. "Emma," I said slowly, "do you want me to break up with Jake?" The question seemed to catch her off guard, and for a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. I saw something raw and desperate in her expression before she quickly recovered. "I want whatever makes you happy," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "If Jake really is the right person for you, then of course I'll support that. But Rachel, I just don't think he is. I think you deserve someone who appreciates and respects your family relationships. Someone who understands how important our bond is. Someone who wouldn't mind that you're the most important person in my life," I pressed. Emma's smile became genuine for the first time in our conversation. "Exactly. Someone who understands that what we have is irreplaceable." The possessiveness in her voice was unmistakable now. Emma didn't want a man in my life who might become more important to me than she was. She had been sabotaging my relationship with Jake because she couldn't tolerate the possibility of losing her position as my primary emotional attachment. But there was more to it than just possessiveness. As Emma continued talking, I began to understand that she had been living vicariously through my relationship drama. She had created crises and conflicts because they made her feel needed and important. Each time I canceled plans with Jake to console her, each time I chose her needs over his, she was reaffirming her power over my choices and priorities. Emma had turned my life into a drama, where she was the starring character and I was the supporting player, existing primarily to validate her importance and feed her need for attention and control. "You know what I think would be best?" Emma said, her voice taking on a dreamy quality. "I think you should focus on yourself for a while. Take a break from dating, spend more time with family. Maybe move back to San Francisco so we can be closer. We could be roommates again like when we were kids. Wouldn't that be wonderful?" The fantasy she was describing, me single, geographically dependent on her, available to focus all my emotional energy on our relationship, revealed the true scope of her manipulation. Emma didn't just want to sabotage my relationship with Jake. She wanted to reconstruct my entire life around her needs and desires. "That does sound nice," I said, playing along while my mind raced. "But what about Marcus? Wouldn't he feel like a third wheel if I moved in with you guys?" Emma waved her hand dismissively. "Marcus travels for work all the time. And besides, he understands how important you are to me. He knows that my relationship with my sister is sacred." The way she said sacred sent chills down my spine. Emma had elevated our sibling relationship to an almost religious level in her mind, something that transcended normal boundaries and justified any behavior in its service. As our conversation continued, I realized that Emma's manipulation had been even more extensive than I had previously understood. She hadn't just been creating fake crises and reading my messages. She had been actively working to ensure that Jake would eventually become frustrated enough to end our relationship himself. "You know," Emma said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking that maybe you should test Jake's commitment. See how he reacts if you need to prioritize family over him one more time. A man who really loves you would be understanding and supportive, don't you think?" She was trying to get me to create one final crisis that would push Jake over the edge. Emma had been playing a long game, systematically weakening my relationship until one final manufactured emergency would cause it to collapse entirely. Then she could comfort me through the breakup, reinforce her narrative about Jake being wrong for me, and position herself as the only person who truly understood and supported me. The calculation behind her strategy was breathtaking. Emma had been orchestrating my relationship's destruction with the precision of a military campaign, all while maintaining the facade of being a loving, concerned sister. But as I sat there listening to Emma outline her vision of our future, me single and dependent on her, Jake out of the picture, our relationship restored to the exclusive intensity she craved, I realized that I finally had what I needed to expose her manipulation at tomorrow's Thanksgiving dinner. I didn't just have evidence of Emma's lies. I now understood her psychology, her motivations, and her ultimate goals. I could explain not just what she had done, but why she had done it. More importantly, I had her own words, spoken just moments ago, revealing her true feelings about Jake and her desire to eliminate him from my life. Emma's confession about wanting to test Jake's commitment, combined with her fantasy about us living together without him, provided the missing context for all her previous manipulation. "Emma," I said, standing up from the bed, "I should probably get back to helping Mom with dinner preparations, but thank you for being so honest with me about your concerns. It really helps me understand where you're coming from." Emma beamed at me, clearly believing that she had successfully reinforced her anti-Jake narrative and moved me closer to the breakup she desired. "Of course, Rachel. That's what sisters are for. We always have to look out for each other." As I walked Emma to the door, I felt a mixture of sadness and determination. The sister I had idolized my entire life didn't really exist. The woman I had trusted with my deepest secrets and most vulnerable moments had been using that trust to manipulate and control me. But tomorrow, at our family's Thanksgiving dinner, the truth would finally come out, and Emma's web of lies would unravel in front of everyone who mattered to both of us. The final confrontation was less than 24 hours away. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a kind of crisp November weather that usually made me feel grateful and peaceful. But as I got ready for our family dinner, my hands were shaking with nervous energy. Today was the day I would expose Emma's manipulation in front of our entire family. I had spent the night organizing my evidence, the recordings of Emma's fake crises, the documentation of her password invasion, the proof that her stories about Marcus were fabricated, and most importantly, the recording from yesterday where she revealed her true motivations. Everything was saved on my phone, ready to be presented at the right moment. NASA. Jake had offered to come with me for moral support, but I had declined. This was something I needed to do alone, as painful as that might be. Jake deserved to have his name cleared with my family, but I also needed to face Emma without anyone else getting caught in the crossfire. The Martinez family Thanksgiving had been a tradition for over 15 years, ever since my mother married David and we became a blended family. My grandmother Rodriguez always came down from Portland. My Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa drove over from Stockton with their teenage twins, and various cousins and family friends filled out the guest list. It was always a warm, chaotic gathering where Emma and I had shared countless happy memories. This year felt different from the moment I walked into my parents' house at noon. Emma was already there, looking radiant in a burgundy dress that perfectly complemented her dark hair. She was holding court in the living room, showing off her engagement ring to relatives who hadn't seen it yet, and discussing her accelerated wedding plans with animated enthusiasm. "Rachel," she called out when she saw me, jumping up to give me an enthusiastic hug. "I was just telling everyone about the wedding date change. January is going to be so magical." I hugged her back, marveling at how natural her performance seemed. To everyone watching, Emma appeared to be the picture of a loving sister and happy bride-to-be. Only I knew about the calculating mind behind her warm smile. "That's wonderful," I said, matching her enthusiasm. "I'm so excited for you." Marcus was standing nearby, looking handsome and relaxed in a navy sweater. When Emma introduced us to some relatives who hadn't met him yet, he spoke about their relationship with genuine affection and respect for Emma. Watching him, I felt a pang of sympathy. Marcus had no idea that his fiancé had been systematically lying to manipulate her sister. He was an innocent victim in Emma's web of deception, just like I had been. My mother had outdone herself with the meal preparation. The dining room table was beautifully set with her best china and crystal, and the house was filled with the wonderful aromas of turkey, stuffing, and all the traditional sides. As we gathered around the table, I looked at the faces of my family members, people who loved both Emma and me, who had no idea that their picture of our relationship was built on lies. My Uncle Tom raised his wine glass for the traditional toast. "To family," he said warmly, "and to the bonds that hold us together through everything life brings our way." "To family," we all echoed, raising our glasses. I caught Emma's eye across the table, and she smiled at me with what seemed like genuine affection. For a moment, I almost wavered in my resolve. Was I really going to destroy this peaceful family gathering to expose my sister's manipulation? Then I remembered all the times she had lied to me, all the ways she had sabotaged my relationship with Jake, all the private messages she had read without my knowledge. I thought about the fantasy she had described yesterday, me single and dependent on her, living my life according to her needs and desires. Yes, I was going to expose the truth. My family deserved to know who Emma really was, and I deserved to be free from her manipulation. The meal proceeded normally for the first hour. We talked about work, travel plans, the upcoming holidays, and Emma's wedding preparations. She regaled everyone with stories about venue hunting and dress shopping, painting a picture of perfect happiness with Marcus that included several subtle digs at couples who let outside pressures interfere with their relationships. Rachel and Jake should definitely come to the engagement party next month, Emma said at one point, her voice carrying a tone of false generosity. Assuming they're still together by then, of course. You know how rocky things have been for them lately. My mother looked at me with concern. Rocky? Rachel, you didn't mention any problems with Jake. This was exactly the opening I had been waiting for. Emma had just publicly characterized my relationship as unstable, based on problems that she herself had created. Actually, Mom, that's something I wanted to talk to everyone about, I said, reaching for my phone. Emma has been very concerned about my relationship with Jake, and I think it's time we discuss some of the things that have been happening. Emma's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of wariness crossing her face. Rachel, I don't think Thanksgiving dinner is the right time for relationship drama. You're absolutely right, I agreed. Family dinner isn't the place for drama, which is why I'm confused about why you've been creating so much of it. The table fell silent. My grandmother set down her fork, my Uncle Tom stopped mid-conversation with Marcus, and all eyes turned to me. I could feel the tension in the room escalating, but I pressed forward. For the past 8 months, Emma has been telling me about various crises in her relationship with Marcus, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Fights about their honeymoon, disagreements about the wedding timeline, concerns about Marcus having second thoughts about their engagement. Rachel, what are you doing? Emma asked, her voice carrying a warning tone that I recognize from our childhood. I'm telling the truth, I replied simply. The problem is, none of these crises actually happened. Emma has been lying to me about problems in her relationship, creating fake emergencies that consistently forced me to cancel plans with Jake. Marcus looked genuinely confused. What fights? What disagreements? Emma, what is Rachel talking about? Emma's face had gone pale, but she quickly tried to regain control of the narrative. Rachel has been under a lot of stress lately. I think she might be misremembering some of our conversations. I'm not misremembering anything, I said, holding up my phone. I have recordings. The word recordings seemed to hit Emma like a physical blow. Her eyes widened, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked genuinely frightened. You recorded our private conversations? She asked, her voice rising in what sounded like outrage but was really panic. I recorded our conversations after I discovered you were lying to me, I clarified. After I called Marcus to verify your stories and learned that none of the problems you described actually existed. I looked around the table at my family members, who were watching this exchange with expressions ranging from confusion to alarm. 3 weeks ago, Emma called me crying about a fight she claimed to have had with Marcus about postponing their wedding indefinitely. She needed me to drive to San Francisco immediately to help her through this crisis, so I called Marcus to get his perspective on the situation. Marcus was staring at Emma with growing alarm. Emma, I never said anything about postponing our wedding. We've never even discussed it. That's exactly what Marcus told me, I continued. So I started investigating Emma's other crises. The fight about their honeymoon plans? The resorts she claimed Marcus had canceled and rebooked? None of those reservations ever existed. Emma made up the entire story. My mother looked between Emma and me with dawning horror. Emma, is this true? Emma's composure was cracking, but she made one last attempt to control the situation. I may have exaggerated some things, she said carefully, but only because I was genuinely upset. Sometimes when you're emotional, you perceive conflicts that might not seem as serious to other people. Exaggerated? I pulled up the recording from our conversation 3 weeks earlier. Let me play what you actually said. Emma's voice filled the dining room, clear and desperate. It's Marcus. He came home from work today and told me he's been having doubts about us. He said he thinks we're too different, that maybe we rushed into the engagement. Rachel, I think he's going to break up with me. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus was staring at Emma with an expression of complete bewilderment. Emma, I never said any of those things. I wasn't even home that day. I was in client meetings until after 8 p.m. Emma's face was now flushed with embarrassment and panic. I was upset. I may have misinterpreted some things you said earlier. What things? Marcus pressed. What could I have possibly said that you would interpret as me wanting to break up with you? Emma couldn't answer because there was no answer. She had fabricated the entire conversation. My Uncle Tom cleared his throat uncomfortably. Rachel, I'm not sure I understand why Emma would make up stories about her relationship problems. Because they weren't really about her relationship, I explained. They were about mine. Every one of Emma's crises happened at times when Jake and I had important plans together. She would create these emergencies that forced me to choose between helping her and spending time with Jake. I pulled up my documentation, showing the timeline of Emma's fake crises and their correlation with my plans with Jake. The honeymoon fight happened the weekend Jake and I were supposed to go camping with his college friends. The wedding postponement crisis happened the night of Jake's company dinner. Every single emergency was timed to disrupt my relationship. My grandmother, who had been listening quietly, spoke up with surprising sharpness. Emma, how did you know about Rachel's plans with Jake? This was the moment I had been building toward. She knew because she had access to my social media passwords. She was reading my private messages with Jake, using that information to time her fake crises for maximum impact on our relationship. The gasps around the table were audible. Even in our age of social media oversharing, the violation of reading someone's private messages felt shocking to my family. Emma finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate plea rather than a denial. Rachel, you're making this sound so calculated. I was just worried about you. Jake was changing you, making you less available to your family. Jake wasn't changing me, I said firmly. You were manipulating me. And it wasn't just me. You've been telling other family members that Jake is controlling and possessive, trying to turn everyone against him based on lies. My mother looked stricken. Emma, did you tell us that Jake was trying to isolate Rachel from her family? Emma's silence was answer enough. You did, my mother continued, her voice filled with disappointment. You made us suspicious of Jake based on things that weren't true. The weight of Emma's manipulation was settling over the entire table. Family members who had believed her narrative about Jake being problematic were now realizing they had been fed lies. The comfortable family dynamic that had existed for years was crumbling as everyone processed the scope of Emma's deception. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one more recording to play, the one that would reveal Emma's true motivations and complete the picture of her manipulation. There's something else, I said, looking directly at Emma. Yesterday, Emma told me what she really wants from this situation. Emma's face went completely white. She knew what was coming. I played the recording from our conversation in my childhood bedroom, Emma's voice filling the dining room with devastating clarity. I think you should focus on yourself for a while. Take a break from dating, spend more time with family, maybe move back to San Francisco so we can be closer. We could be roommates again like when we were kids. Wouldn't that be wonderful? The implications of Emma's fantasy were clear to everyone at the table. She hadn't been trying to protect me from Jake. She had been trying to eliminate him so she could have me all to herself. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air, he said, his voice tight with emotion. He walked out of the dining room, and we could hear the front door open and close behind him. Marky, Emma finally broke down completely, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand, she sobbed. You're my sister. You're the most important person in my life. I couldn't stand watching Jake take you away from me. The raw admission hung in the air, confirming everything I had suspected about her motivations. Emma's manipulation hadn't been about protecting me. It had been about protecting her own position as the center of my emotional world. My father, who had been silent throughout the entire confrontation, finally spoke. Emma, what you did was wrong. Deeply wrong. You violated Rachel's privacy. You lied to all of us. And you tried to sabotage her relationship, based on your own selfish desires. The Thanksgiving dinner that was supposed to be a celebration of family bonds had become a reckoning with the truth about those bonds. Emma's web of lies had finally been exposed, but the consequences were only just beginning. The silence that followed Emma's breakdown was deafening. My family sat frozen around the Thanksgiving table, trying to process the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The beautiful dinner my mother had worked so hard to prepare sat cooling and forgotten as we all grappled with the reality that Emma, the golden child, the successful daughter, the loving sister, had been living a lie. Emma continued sobbing, her carefully constructed facade completely shattered. "You don't understand what it's like," she gasped between tears. "Everyone always leaves. Dad left when we were kids, and I watched you grow up, and I knew that someday someone would take you away from me too. I couldn't let that happen. You're all I have." The desperation in her voice was raw and genuine, perhaps the first completely honest thing she had said in months. But her pain didn't justify her actions, and I could see from the expressions around the table that my family understood that. My mother was the first to speak, her voice shaky with emotion. "Emma, honey, Rachel isn't going anywhere. Having a romantic relationship doesn't mean she stops being your sister." "But it does," Emma insisted, looking around the table with wild eyes. "You didn't see how she changed when Jake came into the picture. She stopped calling as much, stopped sharing everything with me. She was slipping away, and I had to do something to stop it." My grandmother, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the entire confrontation, leaned forward with the kind of authority that comes from 8 decades of life experience. "Emma, what you did wasn't love, it was control. Real love wants the other person to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't center around you." The wisdom in her words cut through the chaos, and I saw Emma flinch as if she had been physically struck. "I should go check on Marcus," my Uncle Tom said quietly, pushing back from the table. He had been watching the drama unfold with increasing discomfort, clearly struggling with how to navigate the family crisis that had erupted in front of him. "I'll come with you," my father said, standing as well. Both men seemed eager to escape the emotional intensity of the dining room, but I also sensed they were giving Marcus the support he needed in processing his fiancé's betrayal. As the men left to find Marcus, the remaining women at the table, my mother, grandmother, Aunt Lisa, Cousin Sarah, and myself, formed a smaller circle around Emma's devastation. Despite everything she had done, she was still family, and the instinct to provide comfort was strong. But I wasn't ready to comfort Emma yet. I was still processing my own hurt and anger, still coming to terms with how completely she had violated my trust. "Emma," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I need you to understand something. What you did wasn't just about Jake. You invaded my privacy, you lied to our entire family, and you made me question my own judgment about someone I care about. You didn't just betray me, you betrayed everyone who trusted you." Emma looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "I know," she whispered. "I know it was wrong. But Rachel, you have to believe me. I never meant for it to go this far. It started small, just little things to keep you close, and then it spiraled out of control." "When did it start?" I asked, genuinely curious about the timeline of her deception. "How long have you been manipulating me?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her struggling with whether to continue lying or finally tell the complete truth. Finally, she sighed in defeat. "It started the second time you brought Jake to family dinner," she admitted. "I could see how happy you were with him, how much you were starting to care about him, and I could see how he looked at you, like you were the most important thing in his world. I realized that if your relationship continued, I would never be your #1 priority again." The confession confirmed my worst fears about Emma's motivations. She hadn't been protecting me from Jake. She had been protecting herself from losing her central position in my life. "So you decided to destroy my relationship to keep me for yourself," I said, stating the ugly truth plainly. "I decided to show you who he really was," Emma corrected, still trying to frame her manipulation as protection. "I thought if I created some tests, some challenges, you would see that he wasn't committed enough to handle the complexities of dating someone with strong family bonds." My Aunt Lisa, who had been listening quietly, spoke up with barely controlled anger. "Emma, you didn't test Jake, you sabotaged him. You created impossible situations designed to make him fail." Emma turned to our cousin Sarah with desperate eyes. "Sarah, you understand, right? You know how important family relationships are." Wouldn't you be concerned if you thought someone was coming between Rachel and me? Sarah looked uncomfortable being put on the spot, but she answered honestly. Emma, I would be concerned if there were real problems. But you created fake problems. You lied about Marcus, you invaded Rachel's privacy, and you manipulated everyone who loves you. That's not protecting family. That's destroying it. The weight of universal disapproval from our family seemed to hit Emma like a physical blow. She had expected at least some support, some understanding of her motivations, but she was finding none. Outside, I could hear male voices on the front porch, presumably my father and uncle talking with Marcus. I wondered what Marcus was thinking, how he was processing the revelation that his fiancé had been systematically lying and manipulating people for months. Would he be able to forgive Emma's deception? Did he even want to try? My mother reached across the table and took Emma's hand. Emma, we love you, but you need help. This level of manipulation and control isn't normal. You need to talk to someone, a therapist, about why you felt the need to do these things. I don't need therapy, Emma said defensively. I need my sister to understand that I was trying to protect her. From what? I asked, my patience finally exhausted. From a man who loves me? From a relationship that makes me happy? From building a life that doesn't revolve entirely around you? Emma's face crumpled again. From making the same mistake I almost made, she whispered. The room fell silent as we all tried to understand what she meant. What mistake? My grandmother asked gently. Emma took a shuddering breath before answering. Before Marcus, I was engaged to someone else. David Chen, Marcus's older brother. We were together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. I thought we were perfect together, but then he started pulling away, saying I was too dependent on my family, too enmeshed with Rachel. He said I needed to learn to be independent before I could be a good wife. This was news to all of us. Emma had never mentioned being engaged before Marcus, never talked about David or any serious relationship that had ended badly. He broke up with me 6 months before our wedding, Emma continued, her voice barely audible. He said I was emotionally immature, that I used my relationship with Rachel to avoid dealing with my own problems. He said I would never be ready for marriage until I learned to be a complete person on my own. The revelation explained so much about Emma's behavior. Her manipulation of my relationship with Jake wasn't just about keeping me close. It was about proving that David had been wrong, that close family relationships weren't incompatible with romantic love. Emma, I said softly, David breaking up with you doesn't mean that every relationship is doomed by close family bonds. It means that maybe there were specific issues in your relationship with David that needed to be addressed. But what if he was right? Emma asked, looking around the table with haunted eyes. What if I am too dependent, too controlling? What if Marcus realizes the same thing David did? As if summoned by her words, Marcus appeared in the doorway of the dining room. His face was composed, but I could see the strain around his eyes. My father and uncle stood behind him, their expressions grim. Emma, Marcus said quietly, we need to talk. Privately. Emma stood up on shaky legs, and I watched as she followed Marcus out of the dining room. The rest of us sat in tense silence, listening to the murmur of voices coming from the living room. We couldn't make out words, but the tone suggested a serious, difficult conversation. After about 20 minutes, we heard the front door open and close. Then Marcus appeared in the dining room doorway alone. Where's Emma? My mother asked immediately. She went for a drive, Marcus said, running his hand through his hair. She needs some time to think. He sat down heavily in Emma's empty chair, looking older than I had ever seen him. I'm sorry you all had to witness that, he said. I had no idea Emma was doing those things. None of us did, my father said, placing a supportive hand on Marcus's shoulder. The question is, what happens now? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I don't know, he admitted. Emma and I obviously have a lot to work through. The wedding. Well, obviously the wedding is postponed indefinitely. My heart went out to Marcus. He was a good man who had fallen in love with someone who had serious issues with manipulation and control. The Emma he thought he was marrying, successful, loving, supportive, was partially a facade hiding someone much more troubled. Are you going to break up with her? My cousin Sarah asked bluntly. Marcus sighed. I don't know. I love Emma, but I can't marry someone who lies to me and manipulates the people she claims to love. If she's willing to get help, to really work on these issues, then maybe we can rebuild trust. But if she's not... He shrugged helplessly. An hour later, Emma returned. She looked exhausted and defeated, her eyes still red from crying. She stood in the dining room doorway, looking at all of us with an expression that seemed to be asking permission to rejoin her own family. Can I sit down? She asked quietly. My mother immediately gestured to an empty chair. Of course, honey. You're always welcome here. Emma sat down and looked around the table, making eye contact with each of us. I owe everyone an apology, she said. Not just Rachel, but all of you. I lied to you, I manipulated you, and I used your love for me to hurt someone who didn't deserve it. The apology felt genuine, more honest than anything Emma had said in months. I've been thinking about what David said to me 2 years ago, Emma continued. About being emotionally immature, about using my relationship with Rachel to avoid dealing with my own problems. I didn't want to believe him then. But maybe he was right. She turned to look directly at me. Rachel, I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I'm going to get help. Real help. I'm going to find a therapist and figure out why I felt like I had the right to control your life. And Marcus? My mother asked gently. Emma's face crumpled slightly. Marcus asked for time. He said he needs to think about whether he can trust me again. I can't blame him for that. The conversation continued for another hour, with Emma answering questions about her manipulation, acknowledging the hurt she had caused, and committing to getting professional help. It wasn't enough to repair all the damage she had done, but it was a beginning. As the evening wound down and family members began to leave, I found myself alone with Emma in the kitchen, helping my mother with the dishes. Rachel, Emma said quietly, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question carefully. I don't know, I answered honestly. What you did hurt me deeply. You violated my trust in ways I'm still processing. But Emma, you're my sister. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it means I want to try to rebuild our relationship if you're really committed to changing. Emma nodded, tears flowing freely again. I am committed, I promise you. I'm going to figure out how to be the sister you deserve. 3 months later, I'm writing this story from my new apartment, the one I share with Jake. Yes, Jake and I worked through the damage Emma's manipulation had caused to our relationship. It wasn't easy, and it required a lot of honest conversations about trust, communication, and boundaries. But ultimately, Jake's love and patience, combined with my newfound understanding of what had really been happening, allowed us to rebuild stronger than before. Emma kept her promise about getting help. She's been seeing a therapist twice a week, working through her issues with control, dependency, and fear of abandonment. She and Marcus are also in couples counseling, slowly rebuilding trust and determining whether their relationship can survive her betrayal. The road to healing hasn't been smooth. There have been setbacks, difficult conversations, and moments when I wondered if our family would ever feel normal again. But Emma's commitment to change seems genuine, and gradually we're learning to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than manipulation. As for our family, the Thanksgiving confrontation forced all of us to examine our relationships more carefully. My parents realized they had been too quick to believe Emma's narrative about Jake without getting to know him themselves. They've since made efforts to build genuine relationships with both Jake and Marcus, independent of Emma's influence. The truth is, Emma's manipulation could have destroyed multiple relationships permanently. But sometimes, when secrets come to light and lies are exposed, it creates an opportunity for something better. Relationships based on truth, rather than deception, love rather than control. I'm not grateful for what Emma did, but I'm grateful for what came after. The chance to build genuine connections based on honesty, the opportunity to set healthy boundaries with family members, and the knowledge that love doesn't require sacrificing your own happiness for someone else's comfort. If you've ever felt manipulated by someone close to you, if you've ever questioned your own judgment because someone you trusted was feeding you lies, know that you deserve relationships based on honesty and respect. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not controlled for who someone else wants you to be. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a manipulative family member is to expose their behavior, because only then can they get the help they need to become the person they're capable of being. The recording I played that Thanksgiving evening didn't just end Emma's engagement. It ended a pattern of manipulation that could have continued for years. In exposing Emma's lies, I freed both of us to build something better. Credingas sa paberhims, that's a kind of truth worth fighting for. Credingas sa paberhims optor. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.